The graveyard visit. Every year on the anniversary of her husband's death, Anna made the solemn pilgrimage to the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. Clad in a long black coat, she walked the winding path lined with ancient, gnarled trees, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. The cemetery was a place of quiet reflection, a sanctuary where she could feel close to her beloved Edward, who had passed away 5 years ago. Edward's tombstone was simple and elegant, just as he had been in life. It bore his name, the dates of his birth and death, and the epitaph, "Forever in our hearts." The first time Anna had visited after his funeral, she had found solace in reading those words. But as the years went by, something strange began to happen. On the second anniversary of his death, Anna noticed something odd. Below Edward's name and epitaph, another name was faintly etched into the stone. Her own name, Anna Thompson. She rubbed her eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light or her grief playing tricks on her. But when she looked again, her name was still there, barely visible but undeniably present. Disturbed, she rushed to the cemetery office and spoke to the caretaker, Mr. Harris. An elderly man with kind eyes, Mr. Harris assured her that no one had tampered with the tombstone. He even accompanied her back to the grave to inspect it, but by the time they returned, the faint etching had disappeared. "It's just your grief, Mrs. Thompson," he said gently. "Sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're mourning." Anna nodded, though unease gnawed at her. She wanted to believe him, but the vision of her name on the tombstone haunted her dreams. The following year, on the third anniversary, Anna returned to the cemetery, a sense of dread accompanying her this time. As she approached Edward's grave, her heart pounded in her chest. She stared at the tombstone, her breath catching in her throat. Her name was there again, clearer than before, along with the date, October 31st, 2024, the current year. Anna stumbled backward, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. She ran to Mr. Harris once more, dragging him to the grave. This time, he saw it too. His face paled, and he murmured something about contacting a stonemason to fix the grave. But deep down, Anna knew this was no ordinary vandalism. As Halloween approached, Anna became consumed by fear. The date on the tombstone loomed over her like a dark cloud. She confided in her best friend, Margaret, who tried to reassure her. "It's probably just some sick prank," Margaret said, though she looked worried herself. "But if it bothers you so much, why don't you stay with me on Halloween? We can have a quiet night in, watch movies, and keep your mind off things." Anna agreed, hoping that Margaret's company would provide some comfort. On the night of October 31st, they settled in with popcorn and a stack of classic films. The evening started off well, but as midnight approached, Anna's anxiety grew. Around 11, the power suddenly went out, plunging the house into darkness. Margaret lit some candles, trying to keep the mood light, but the flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the walls. "It's just a storm," Margaret said, though there was no sign of rain outside. "The power will be back soon." They continued to watch the movie, the atmosphere tense. Just before midnight, there was a knock at the door. Margaret frowned, getting up to answer it, but Anna grabbed her arm. "Don't," Anna whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It feels wrong." Margaret hesitated, but then shook her head. "It's probably just a neighbor or something." She walked to the door and opened it slightly. There was no one there. As she closed the door, a gust of wind blew through the house, extinguishing the candles. The room was plunged into darkness, and Anna's heart raced. In the silence, they both heard it, a whisper, low and insistent, calling Anna's name. She felt a cold hand on her shoulder and screamed, spinning around to find herself face to face with nothing. The whispering grew louder, and she heard her name again, this time more clearly. "Anna Thompson," the voice said. "Your time has come." Panic surged through her, and she bolted for the door, dragging Margaret with her. They ran to the car and drove to the cemetery, Anna barely able to breathe. She had to see it for herself, to confront whatever force was haunting her. They arrived at the cemetery just as the clock struck midnight. The moon was high, casting an eerie glow over the graves. Anna and Margaret made their way to Edward's tombstone. The sight that met them froze Anna's blood. Her name was now deeply engraved on the stone, along with the date, October 31st, 2024. Below it, another inscription had appeared, "Reunited in death." Before she could react, a shadowy figure emerged from behind the tombstone. It was Edward, or at least something that looked like him, his eyes hollow and his face twisted into a sinister grin. "Welcome, my love," the figure whispered, reaching out to her. "I've been waiting." Anna screamed as the ground beneath her began to crumble. She felt herself being pulled down, cold earth swallowing her feet. Margaret tried to hold onto her, but a powerful force wrenched them apart. "Anna," Margaret cried, but it was too late. Anna was dragged into the grave, her screams fading into the darkness. The last thing she saw was Edward's ghostly face, smiling in satisfaction. The next morning, the townspeople found the cemetery undisturbed, except for one grave. Edward Thompson's tombstone now bore two names, Edward Thompson and Anna Thompson, with the same death date, October 31st, 2024. Margaret, traumatized by the events, left the town and never returned. The legend of the haunted tombstone grew, and every year, on Halloween, townsfolk would visit the grave, leaving flowers for the couple who were said to be reunited in death. But no one dared to linger after dark, for fear of hearing the whispers and seeing the shadows that still haunted the cemetery, forever marking the tragic end of Anna Thompson.